So I'm seeing a lot of people, because it's the end of the decade, it's the end of the 2010s. So I'm seeing a lot of people do decade in review videos. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do that, but for World Series and for baseball. So this is I am doing a video for my top ten World Series of the decade, and this is just my list. Uh, I think there's only one right answer, even though I don't like it. There's one right answer, so I can't be biased. So let's get into this. For my number 10, I put the San Francisco Giants beating the Detroit Tigers in 2012. It was 4-0. Uh, they swept the Tigers. This was the second year. This was the when the even year Giants started popping up, where they would always win a World Series in even years, and we will see if that would continue. Because they won it in 2012, and they beat a pretty good Tigers team. That Tigers team had great pitching rotation of Verlander, Scherzer, Sanchez, Zimmerman, and I don't remember their number 5. They also had Miguel Cabrera, who was still in his prime at that time. I believe, I think that year, it was either this year, 2012, or the next year, 2013, where he had the Triple Crown. So he was at his peak of his playing ability with Detroit. And they just got destroyed by the San Francisco Giants. Giants just mopped the floor with them, which is really surprising. We figured it was going to be a pretty good series and maybe 6, 7 games. No, it was a flat out sweep. Not the Giants, the Tigers just could not get anything going against the Giants, who I believe at that point still had, I believe, I know Bumgarner was still on that team. Was Lincecum still pitching for them? And was Zito? I don't think Zito was. He might have been. I know Bumgarner, maybe Lincecum. But no, just Giants were the better team in the 2012 series, and just mopped the floor with them. But I don't really remember much from that one. I just remember Sergio Romo getting the final out in Detroit, which I thought was pretty fun. Number 9 for me was 2018's World Series, Red Sox and the Dodgers. Um, with this one, I'm not a fan of either team really, but like I said, I uh, I was just more surprised that it went 5 games. Red Sox beat them up pretty good. Only went I and that was Betts' breakout year last year. I believe they still had Martinez on that team. They were a really hot team in the AL East yeah, in 2018, and they just steamrolled through the playoffs. And I believe the Dodgers did the same as well, and just could not win anything. Just could not do anything in the World Series. For number 8, I have the 2010 playoffs. The Giants again, and the Rangers. Now, this was the first World Series the Giants have made it to since, I believe, 2002 against the Angels. And then this was the first World Series the Rangers have made it in their franchise. So this was a first time for everybody, for both teams in a long time, in a while. 8 years for the Giants. What, 30, I think 40, maybe 50 years for the Rangers. I think 50 plus years. And Rangers were a hot team. They had Beltre. They had MVP candidate Josh Hamilton on that team. Michael Young, Ian Kinsler. They had a really good young core. And, well, they had a really good core, especially with Hamilton being a little bit younger. Beltre was more of the veteran on that team. But high powered offense, and then the Giants just came in and shut him down. Oh, and Nelson Cruz was on that team. I knew I was forgetting somebody on the Rangers team. And just the Giants came in and shut him down. I don't know if it's because it was their first time in the World Series, which, I mean, could have could have a effect on them. But just like in 2012 with the Giants and the Tigers, just kind of mopped the floor with the Rangers. Just didn't give them a chance to win. Number 7 for me, which one I remember, I think this was no, it's the 2015 World Series with the Royals and the Mets. Royals beat the New York Mets 4-1. This was the first time the Royals. This was actually the second time they made it to a World Series since 1985 when they beat St. Louis. And then the Mets. This was their first time in the World Series since 2000 when they had the Subway Series against the Yankees. And Mets had, this was prime Matt Harvey. I believe they had Syndergaard. I believe they had DeGrom. And I remember it was Francisco Rodriguez. No, Henry Mejia. And I think they had, or was it Henry Familia? I think Familia. Henry Familia, I think their bullpen blew a lot of saves. Their bullpen blew a lot. And Royals just freaking, in most of these early ones, they just didn't give them a chance. And the Mets didn't help their cause either. I believe Daniel Murphy was still on the Mets team. So the Mets had a really good team. And they had their one chance. Like the New York Jets in the NFL, they had their one chance. They didn't win it, and who knows when they will be back to the World Series. Number 6 is the 2013 series, Red Sox and the Cardinals. Red Sox beat the Cardinals 4-2. And I have a friend that's a Red Sox fan. I'm a Cardinals fan. He will always give me crap. He will always say it whenever he can. I believe it was Game 3 or Game 4. It was in Busch. It was either 3, 4, or 5. I'm almost certain it was 3. Might have been 5. I don't remember. I remember Koji was up to bat, or not up to bat. Koji was pitching. Colton Wong was on first. And Colton Wong got picked off during the game. And he would always give me crap about that. Always. He still does, whenever he can. And I like Colton Wong as a player now. Yeah, it took me a little while, but I like him as a player. I've grown to like him. But this also, 2013, this was Big Poppy's last year, and he went out on top, smashing the cover off of baseballs. He could not, if you threw it 3 feet out of the strike zone, he would hit it 400 feet. Just no matter where you threw it to him, it was gone. No matter what count, no matter if it was in the dirt. Just, you could not stop him that year. Just whatever you couldn't do. And I believe Mike Napoli was the catcher on that team. He was a pretty good power hitter. I think that was Lester's last year with the Red Sox. Koji was a lights out closer that year in 2013 and really hasn't, I don't think he's even in the league anymore. He hasn't been that was his breakout year, his breakout year. And I mean, what time to have a breakout year though, in just the year you win the World Series. But he was a really good pitcher, had a nasty split finger fastball, and just put the Cards away in 6. Now we're getting to the fun ones. All the top 5 all went 7 games. I didn't feel like I should have put a 7-game series at like 9th or 10th, because I think if you go 7 games, you're going to be a really good World Series. But my 5th one of this decade is the most recent one. 2019, the Nationals beat the Astros 4-3. One thing that I like about this World Series. The Nationals at the beginning of the year were one of the worst teams. I think 10-31, I think is what it was going into June or at the end of May, which is the same thing. and um, they had a bull. I remember distinctly they had a bullpen ERA over 7, which you don't win baseball games, let alone playoff games, with a bullpen ERA that high. And the Nationals ended up getting themselves together. Their bullpen started to settle down, and they made it to the division, or they made it to the wild card. They were a wild card team. Beat the Brewers on a comeback. Beat the Dodgers on a comeback. They swept my team. They swept the Cardinals. And that was in the championship series. And then not a single home team won all 7 games. Not a single home team won all games in the World Series, which has never happened before, and I don't think it ever will again. But I'm talking a little bit too much on the Nationals. I have to say, this is their first World Series of this Nationals in franchise history. The city of Washington, D.C., when there was the Senators the first time, which are now the Twins, have won a World Series, which I believe was 1924. It was 1924 was the last time they won a World Series. It was behind Walter Johnson's The Big Train, his arm. I believe it was 1924. But not the Nationals, the Astros, powerhouse team in the AL West. They won that division. They ended up beating the Rays. Ended up taking them to 5 games in the divisional series, and they squeaked out of that. And then they went to take on the Yankees, everybody's most favorite team, the New York Yankees. And then, long story short, Aroldis Chapman hung a slider, Jose Altuve took it deep, and the Yankees were done. They lost. They did not move on to the World Series, but the Astros did. And all 7 games were a really good watch. It was some really good baseball, especially with most of the Nationals' wins coming in comebacks, usually around the 7th inning or later. So it was always, it was glued. It was must-watch TV, this World Series. My number 4 pick is the 2017 series, Dodgers-Astros, with the Astros beating the Dodgers 4-3 in the series. It ended up going 7 games. Now, the game that everybody talks about, Game 5, was awesome, epic. If you were to show anybody a game of baseball, that is one of your probably top 10 to click on to show them. It's just all the machinations and all the lead changes and how they were dingers, stuff like that, made it so much fun to watch. And it was a competitive series. Competitive series always will raise the stakes. If it's a 4-0 sweep, that's whatever. If it's Game 7 is the best. Game 7 in the World Series, I think, is the best thing in sports. Not just baseball. So, but Astros beat the Dodgers 4-3 in the series. The Dodgers, this was their first time making it to the World Series since, I believe, 1988, when they won it. Unless I missed something here. Yeah, I believe it was 1988 was the last time they made it to the World Series. My number 3 pick for top 10 World Series of the decade is the 2014 World Series, Giants-Royals. This was the first time that the Royals had made it to the World Series since 1985. And there was a big groundswell, at least in Missouri, I would assume even bigger in Kansas City, where we were wondering if this was the year Kansas City was going to win. It was the right time. You had Alcides Escobar, who I think was an underrated shortstop. I think Alcides Escobar was pretty good at that position. He never did anything great, but he did everything good. Uh, this was when you still had the Royals core. Salvi Perez was still there, which he is now. Eric Hosmer was still there. Alex Gordon was really good. I'm blanking on some names. Why am I blanking? Mustakis was there. And you had Wade Davis. I believe Wade Davis. I can't remember any of the starting pitchers. I think maybe. Why am I see his face. Jason Hamill might have been there, I think. But yeah, I believe this was also the World Series where Alcides Escobar led off. I think it was game one. I think it might have been game seven. I think it was game seven with an inside the park home run, which I think was the first time that this ever happened in a World Series game. And then another thing people will point out in this World Series is Madison Bumgarner's performance. Bruce Bochy rode the living hell out of Madison Bumgarner's arm. They wanted to win their third championship in 5 years. And they were going to ride Bumgarner's arm. He pitched, it seemed like he pitched every other game. He pitched game one, he pitched game three, he pitched game five. I know for a fact he pitched game seven. He finished that game. Because I remember the final out was being made by Pablo Sandoval. That was his last year in the Giants before he got that big payday to go to Boston. And he caught the ball and then just fell on the ground back first, just happy as hell. But yeah, I remember watching that one a little bit. I wanted the Royals to win because they were a Missouri team. But now these are my top two. Number two is probably my favorite World Series that I have watched. Number one is the correct answer. This, for me, it's 1A, 1B, and there's a reason for that, and which that will be shown when number one happens. Number two is 2011, the Cardinals and the Rangers, which is, like I said, my favorite. This was the last year of the Tony La Russa and Albert Pujols era in St. Louis. La Russa would end up retiring. Albert Pujols would go take millions of dollars from the Angels to play in Anaheim. The Rangers were a hot team who made it to the World Series the previous year and lost. They still had most of their key pieces, like I said, Michael Young, Ian Kinsler, Josh Hamilton, Adrian Beltre. I believe C.J. Wilson was still there. I think he started game one as well. He was a really good pitcher. Yeah, he was. C.J. Wilson was there. He was a really good pitcher this year. And let's talk about how they made it. Like I said, Rangers were a powerhouse team. They just won the AL West. And that was when they were still 4 teams in the AL West. And they just smoked right through. They ran through the competition in the AL. Cardinals' journey, however, was a little bit more treacherous. They somehow made it into the playoffs, being down 11 games in the wild card with 30 games left in the season. They were down 11 with 30 games left. And they made the wild card. They had help from the Braves collapsing. It was game 163 and 162. I think it was 162 with Longoria hitting the homer in Tropicana on the left field wall. That's probably the best. That was probably my best day in watching baseball, and as a baseball fan, was that day. But game 3 was a blowout, which I have to mention because just the amount of the score. It was a blowout of 16-7 St. Louis. A total of 23 points were scored. 23 runs, 23 runs. Now, let's skip to game 6. This is probably the most, what's a word I can describe game 6 in? I don't know. But it's probably the best baseball game I've seen. And I'm going to start off with David Freese in the 5th inning. He ended up booting. It was a fly ball, hit him in the glove, and he dropped. A run or two, I think 2 runs would score later in that inning. And now let's fast forward, and I believe it was 8-6 was the score going into the 9th. Neftali Feliz, flamethrower that year, hitting 100, 101, 102, just could not stop him. Just a complete flamethrower. The Rangers were out one strike away from winning their first World Series in their franchise history. David with I believe Albert Pujols on first, and no on second, and Alan Craig on first. Freese would end up hitting the game-tying triple, which hit over the head of Nelson Cruz. Now, if you watch that back, if he would have probably played back, he was playing a little bit shallow. If he would have played back normally, that ball, it wouldn't have been a triple. But why he was playing shallow was because he didn't want Pujols to score. But with that happening, he allowed 2 runs to score to tie up the game. Top of the ninth, Josh Hamilton, ended up hitting a 2-run homer off of Lance Lynn to make it, I believe, well, if it was 9-7, maybe, I think 9-7, and it seemed like it was the nail in the coffin. Lance Lynn, who now plays for Texas, ironically, Hamilton just came up, smacked it to right center, and I thought that was it when I was watching. And this was late at the time. This was probably 11 o'clock at night. That game took forever. We were losing, I think by at that point, 2 runs. Again, and the bottom of the 10th this time, bottom of the 10th this time, with the Rangers still 1 strikeout away again from winning the World Series. Lance Berkman, hit a single to center field to tie up the game. Then probably the most famous thing of Game 6, other than Freese's triple to tie the game, was Freese's home run to dead center to win the game. And then Joe Buck's famous call, which was, "We will see you tomorrow night." I remember that very fondly. And Cardinals just stomped the Rangers. It was, I think, 6-2 was the final score. And that was the last time we have won the World Series. And the last time Pujols and La Russa played for St. Louis. Now, what I think is the correct answer when you ask me what is the top World Series of this decade, I believe it's the 2016 World Series between Chicago Cubs and Cleveland Indians. This was a World Series where one team's drought was going to end. The Cleveland Indians drought, which I believe was 1954, was the last time they made it to the World Series. 1954. I don't think they've ever won it. 1954 was the last time they made it. And the Chicago Cubs, which was the last time they won a World Series, was 1908. Cleveland took a 3-1 lead in the series. Game 5 was still in Chicago. And I'm sitting at this point like, okay, I think Cleveland's going to win this. Remember, I'm a Cardinals fan. I don't want the Cubs to have any modicum of success in their franchise while I'm alive. And here I was thinking, all right, come on, Cleveland. You got a 3-1 lead in the series. That 3-1 lead didn't last long. Cubs won the last game at Wrigley, so it's 3-2. So you still got 2 more games at home, Cleveland. Chicago ended up winning Game 6, so series is tied 3-3. At that point, especially going into the 10th, when I saw who was coming up in the lineup, I'm like, Cubs. The Cubs have all the momentum in this game. As soon as Game 7 started, Cubs had all the momentum. Cleveland had none. They lost it all. And like I said, if you were to show somebody a World Series game, especially Game 7, this is the one to show. Game 7, 2016, Cubs Indians. One of the moments I vividly remember from this World Series was the at-bat that Rajai Davis had with Aroldis Chapman. I vividly remember Davis having, I think it was like an 8-9 pitch at-bat maybe, and then Chapman, I believe, hung. It was either it was an off-speed pitch. It was either a changeup or a slider, and almost somewhat in the spot that, from what I remember, almost in the spot that Altuve took Chapman deep in 2019's ALCS. But Rajai Davis, who had 55 career home runs up to that point, who was batting horribly in the World Series. I think he was like a 191 batting average. It was sub Mendoza line. But Chapman ended up, or not Chapman, Rajai Davis ended up hitting a home run to tie up the game, which I believe at that point was 6-6. I think so. But the Indians, after Rajai Davis' home run, they just could not break through. So then Game 7 would go into extras. The best thing. You get free baseball at Game 7, the last game of the baseball season. The Cleveland Indians had Bryan Shaw on the mound. The Chicago Cubs had Chris Schwarber. Why am I blanking on his name? Kyle Schwarber, Chris Bryant, and Ben Zobrist coming up to bat. At that point, I said, Cubs are winning the series. And what do you know? Kyle Schwarber got on base. Albert Almora pitched hit for him. Zobrist hit a double, which is one of the most iconic images from that series, is when Zobrist is all happy and everything that he just scored the first run which would be the first winning run, and it's just him happy as all get up, and it's just complete and raw emotion. But they, I think, ended up winning 8-6, and Carl Edwards got the save. I do remember that. Carl Edwards got the save. Like I said, final score was 8-6, but they didn't need it. Indians were lifeless at that point. And like I said, at the beginning of the century, this was the Cubs' first World Series since 1908. 108 years. And they won it. They did it. And that was one time that I actually had to congratulate the Cubs. But yeah, I felt like I needed to get into, it's about the end of the decade. We've got a couple more days left of 2019. I figured I need to do some top 10s for baseball. It's the off season. I can have a little fun with this. So if you guys liked it, press the like button. Subscribe down below if you haven't already. That would be very appreciated. Comment down below what you guys think your top 10 World Series of this decade are. Let me know. Let's see if we can get something going about that. And I will see you guys when I publish a new video. Bye.